this session is being recorded, so it's probably worthwhile making sure that your camera's switched off and your microphone's switched off, just to kind of save for any interference and the like. Okay, so welcome. My name's Brian Clark. I'm an education officer with Education Scotland on the digital skills team. And for the past few years, we've been working towards kind of developing digital skills with our educators. But over the last 18 months, that's certainly been more important than ever. And just when we think about the past 18 months and think about what learning and teaching has been like and delivering education, it's all been digital, it's all been online. And everything that we've done, that we do in school, from pedagogy to collaboration to types of assessment to family learning, all shifted to a digital world. And on the back of that, I picked up, and I know that some of my colleagues did, and I'm sure you did as well, the amount of professional conversations and engagement that were going on online, on online communities, on Twitter and on other social channels about, well, how do I deliver this better, or I want to learn a bit more about that, and how are you delivering assessment, and how are we doing quality assurance. That professional discussion and collaboration was never more apparent. And I thought it was just worth acknowledging that over the pandemic, that the strength of digital skills has increased so much in our educators, but it's not been digital alone. All the surrounding parts of education has been there, and in particularly learning and teaching. So when we think about those various aspects of what's on the screen there, quality assurance and pedagogy, the types of conversations you would see kind of groups of teachers having within subject areas as part of discussions online, we're all focused around, well, how do I better deliver learning and teaching? Because when I'm at a computer, when I'm delivering it asynchronously, but if I'm delivering it live, and all these kind of approaches like retrieval practice and being explicit about your learning intentions, how do we deliver better feedback to our learners, were all being discussed, and they were all digital solutions. Formative assessment was the same. How do we deliver formative assessment in this remote world, in this remote setting? And people began to talk more about kind of quizzing tools and how do I write better multiple choice questions, and what does that mean for my learners, and how do I know how much they're progressing? The opportunities for learners to be more perhaps creative with the range of media they were using. Sorry, I saw someone say they can't see the slides. Are the slides not appearing for everyone? Are we okay, or is it my side that's an issue?
Appearing, yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Miss McMaster said perhaps you might want to try and leave and come back in again. I know that sounds a bit like Control-Alt-Delete to kind of restart, but sometimes those things happen, so apologies for that. But we saw all these things about formative assessment all moving digital. Even aspects of family learning moved digital in this online world. So a few tweets that I'd picked up over the past kind of few months that I kind of kept for situations like this that I thought were really interesting. The maths and numeracy faculty at Knox Academy were delivering sessions for parents during lockdown about how to better understand and deliver and support numeracy learning at home. It was all done virtually online. Of course, quality assurance for the alternative certification model moved online because we couldn't meet and talk about, how our learners were progressing and what they were doing. So we began to kind of create communities of practice and share using things like OneNote, how we understood how our pupils were engaging and were they engaging with the work we were doing. All the tools that were available within things like Microsoft Teams and Google Classroom let us get a better idea of who was doing what and when. And as far as collaboration goes, I think all of those things that I just mentioned there, I just picked up a section from a Microsoft team that I'm in, involved computing teachers, talking about sharing and supporting each other. And more of that happened online. So the digital skills of our educators increased rapidly, but so did their understanding of how to deliver learning and teaching. So from an Education Scotland perspective, in the DigiLearn Scot team, we endeavoured over the lockdown period to take our existing offer, which was to go out to local authorities and agree with local authorities the types of professional learning that staff might benefit from in terms of digital skills, and we would deliver that face to face. Again, all that rapidly moved online, and we were delivering like lots of webinars to lots of practitioners across the country. Our online platform, DigiLearn Scott, was the place where all that stuff was hosted, and we began to get stories and experiences from practitioners about how they were using digital in their settings, and the support for all of that. We began to move to on-demand video via YouTube. So we began to see the engagement, how we were delivering content to practitioners change dramatically. And indeed, the way that we will probably move forward, a bit like what Gail mentioned, there was the kind of what happened pre-pandemic and what happened during the pandemic, and that says this is the new ways of working. But this idea of engaging online to reach an audience is something that the digital team are going to continue doing. But the interesting thing about this is that during all that time, all these skills were being developed, and particularly those digital skills. And it became quite kind of obvious is that we've got this group of educators who are digitally skilled, and they're in conversations about better learning and teaching. So how can we make the most of that pool of talent? How can we offer something for that pool of educators who feel that, you know, they are digitally competent, they're digitally skilled, they're agile, they're fluent, they want to make learning better. They don't really need to come to sessions about how to use a particular product. They want to offer more. So myself and some others in the digital team were having a conversation about what can that offer be to those people. So we kind of were having a think about what that might look like, and talked to our colleagues in PLL and curriculum design to ask about the programs of work that they offer, and figured that it probably some of that modeling would be really good to use in a digital context to join up kind of what our educators know about digital, what we know about learning and teaching and education, and join them together to produce outputs for the system that might be of use to more than just an individual. So Education Scotland did this a year or so ago with the No Tosh team to produce the curriculum design thought papers, which you may have seen. And that whole process where they gathered 40 or so educators together, skilled educators, to talk about those issues of things like curriculum design and about interdisciplinary learning. And they produced these thought papers, and the outputs, these thought papers are the outputs of the conversations and the provocations and the time spent together discussing those issues around about those topics. And that model and that idea is kind of what spurred on this kind of, I suppose, first attempt for us to kind of create a digital thinking program to bring together digitally skilled educators, have provocations around about themes in education, and try and produce outputs that would support the system. So that's how the digital thinking program came around. And again, looking at kind of the commentary that was going on in the kind of digitally skilled educator world and education in general, we kind of picked up on some themes that we thought we would kind of look at in the first instance. So within the digital thinking program, we've got a kind of plan to deliver, currently delivering themes on these sessions. So this idea about how we develop self-regulation skills in learners or independent learners. How can technology be used to change our curriculum offer and add flexibility to that? And then if you're in a digitally enabled environment, what can we do to make that even better? So those are the kind of main themes and topics we're going to be looking at over the digital thinking program. And those might change based on feedback that comes from the cohorts, based on other influences. But it certainly seems to be the kind of content that the participants were interested in. So we had like an introduction session to kind of say to people, look, we want to run this program. Come and find out a little bit about the aims, pretty much what I've just kind of said there. And if you're interested, you know, kind of sign up. It was kind of to make sure that people were signing up for the right reasons. They weren't signing up to learn how to use our product. The assumption was these educators were digitally competent and they wanted to kind of work towards a greater output, a greater goal. So from that information session, there's about 130 people came to that information system, and just about half of them kind of signed up for that first cohort, that first group of educators. So that first group of educators is about 62 or so that have signed up to the program, and we're starting to look at that first section. You know, how can digital help with self-regulation, independent learning? And the idea is to kind of take each of those sessions. Mr. Stoddart, the program is still running. I'll come to the timeline in just a few minutes, but I will get to that in just a second. So what we do for each of the sessions is to say, well, let's take a block of time, 6 or 7 weeks, look at a theme, and then kind of say, well, what does this currently look like? And what can it look like? And then how can we get there? And in order to do that, we'll have some guest presenters, some provocations, some opportunities for discussion, and try and find common ground, common issues, common I don't want to say problems, but common things we might want to common things that we might want to try and suggest some ideas and solutions for. So our first cohort is made up of this. This is the kind of 62 people who've signed up. So the 62 participants come from early years up to high school, one ASN and one national organisation, who I believe is Kirsty McFall, actually. I think it's Kirsty who signed up for that, just so it's maybe 61 in general. And the makeup of the group, it comes from all parts of the system. It's leaders at all levels, and it truly is. So we've got classroom practitioners in early years, teachers, principal teachers, deputy head teachers from secondary, from primary, and from early years establishments who fit that bill of being digitally confident and want to make. Thanks, Kirsty, and want to make. A contribution to how digital can be better. And these people represent 20 of the 32 local authorities, and there are 2 independent schools in there and 1 national organisation, which I'm assuming is Kirsty again with Education Scotland. So each week we have sessions a bit like this. So within the kind of community, this is the general idea. We have a weekly presenter who will share something on the theme and have some provocations for discussion. During the week that follows, this tends to happen on a Monday, and then during the week that follows, I've created 3 spots to come together. It's kind of optional, so there's Thursday at 4 o'clock, Wednesday at 4 o'clock, and Thursday at 7 o'clock. I'm asking people to come in to find the space to chat and talk about the input we heard that week, some of the kind of provocations that the guests have given, and then kind of bring together some thoughts, and then we kind of share that out again via the team using the OneNote tool that's within the staff team there, a bit like a class notebook, and that's working quite well. So we aimed to start this in the start of September. So the end of August, actually, we aim to start. And we end up starting a few weeks later, just with kind of settling back into school. So we're not quite as far ahead in this first cohort as I would have wanted to be for delivering at this session, because I wanted to be able to share a bit more of the outputs that we've been working towards. But because it's still very much in its infancy, and of course SLF is this week, and actually one of the recommendations we sent out to the team was to go and watch Louise Foreman and Tim Beattie's session on independent digital learning yesterday. So we'll use that as a stimulus to kind of have a discussion about later on this week. But we've not managed to get through as much of the content as we wanted, but I wanted to give you a flavour of kind of what's currently happening. So the that first section, this kind of how can digital help develop self-regulated learners, independent learning. Again, Gail's presentation and our keynote at the start of SLF made reference to, we need to make our learners kind of better at kind of learning independently. And digital's got this massive rollout happening. It's going to change. It's going to be part of education. So we thought, well, let's kind of say, well, what does that actually mean for our learners, and do we understand our learners' journey? So our introduction session, we kind of started thinking about, okay, our learners' experience, when we think about it, people go, yeah, it's the early years, primary, secondary, after higher education and work. But when we really drill down, there are things that actually happen that make a lot of learners' journeys not quite as linear as that. Things like, moving house, family breakups. A pupil moves school for reasons perhaps to do with, not settled in a particular school, so gets moved to another school. Working in a school, I know I've accepted pupils into the school from third year instead of from first year. So that actual linear progression, yet while it's linear, it's not exactly straight. So those interruptions can cause interruptions in learning. Now, when we think about interruptions in learning, and we think about, okay, particularly the pandemic, but pandemic aside, learners are often taken out of that normal linear progression through their education for health issues. Perhaps there's kind of school closures and they've got to do home learning. Learners in school on a part-time basis for a number of reasons. As learners move through into secondary school in the senior phase, the number of pathways are available on their timetable is much wider now. So again, this was something that, because the makeup of the group is obviously from a lot of sectors, it was really kind of interesting to see what some of those kind of pathways were. So just again, if there's any kind of primary practitioners, early years practitioners who are not quite sure what the senior phase options can look like in school just now, there's a lot of them. Even without the pandemic and the new normal, before that, we had learners who were in class all the time, do the normal subjects. We had partnerships with colleges, so some pupils went off to college for a couple of periods a week to go and do construction or courses that can't be offered on site. We got 6 years doing self-study options with the Open University or YAS. We've got eSchool, that you're learning in front of a computer, not with a direct instruction teacher in front of you. You've got opportunities for support and consolidation through things like revision classes, the learning that happens out of school anyway, and work-based learning. All of these things are part of a learner's pathway, a learner's set of opportunities now. So if there ever was a need for pupils to be more independent and more self-regulated, it's now. Between the disruption and possible disruptions on the learner's path, then the number of opportunities that are available to our learners in school, and indeed will likely to grow as we move forward. How do we make sure our learners are better self-regulated? And where can and should or does digital fit into that? So one of the things we started off with was a bit of a reflective exercise to say, right, what happened then, and what's happening now, and what can happen in the future? And we asked the cohort to kind of try and identify something that they were doing with digital tools that actually was developing self-regulation, independent learning with their learners. And essentially, it was just a really simple form we asked them to fill in, was to identify what year group are you teaching and what's working for you with digital to develop independent learning, digital learning. And they started kind of contributing responses to that. And I would like to invite you all, if you're a teacher, I know there are there's going to be some teachers here. I know that there are people who aren't teachers, but again, if you do have any suggestions or ideas or experiences in this, it would be really handy to see, what is working for you and your learners with digital tools. Because one of the outputs we'd like to try and chart is, what does progression look like with independent digital learning, independent self-regulation? If I was to draw a line from early years to secondary and pinpoint the types of activities that were happening at P1 to 3 level, P4 to 7 level, S1 to S3, that were using digital tools to support independent learning, that might be a useful document. It might be useful for clusters to look at to inform the learning and teaching policies and strategies. It might be useful for local authorities to say, well, actually, we're going to focus on these skills and whatever it might be. And if those skills are already in place, or there's examples of that, then it could be a useful piece of information. So if you do have any particular ideas or experience in delivering independent digital learning that's kind of you felt has worked, please do feel free to kind of contribute to that form. I think the more evidence we have, it would be an interesting progression to look at. We also asked individuals on the, where's my mouse gone? There it is. We also ask individuals on the course as part of the introductory sessions to think about 6 questions, you know. So again, a bit similar to that, and what was working for them? What did you expect to work that didn't work? And was there anything that surprised you during that period of remote learning? And it was just to kind of stimulate conversations about where these outputs could be and what they could be. And there were some really interesting bits of feedback that came from that. You know, so a number of people were said, you know, I was really surprised that some of the pupils who are quiet in class or didn't really engage in class were actually engaging better online. Or the people just because they weren't engaging in parts of conversations and chats were still producing work, and they found that unexpected. There are some local authority stories in there, and I'm sure every local authority has stories about the success. Sorry, I'm going to pop up there. About the success. Was that link not working? Oh, sorry, I'll do it again. About the success of their share.
Brian, it might be because it's a glow.
Oh, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It says anyone can respond. Sorry. The link via the QR code works. Lovely. I'll go and stick that back there just for a second if you want to scan it. I'll paste it again in the chat just to see if that works.
The link is working, Brian.
All right. Sorry. Thank you. That thing where you kind of get yourself sidetracked. It's a bit like when when your kids speak at you when you're in the middle of full flow and you're going to go off on one. Sometimes that happens. Anyway, so some of the interesting things that came back from that was that local authorities saying, look, we worked with our teachers to build a library of videos, and we shared them with eSchool and those types of things, and we had like 6,000 of our pupils engaged with those videos, and that was a surprising result because they didn't expect so much success. So just feeling and collecting those types of stories helps to say, well, actually, there is proven success and use of digital tools within learning and teaching that is supporting that independent learning. So how do we move that forward? As a group, how can we help move that forward? So we asked a couple of people to come and kind of present to us. We've got a few more lined up. And the first person who came to speak to us was Andrew Jewell. And I'm sure some of you know Andrew. Andrew's an experienced educator who currently kind of works with kind of the Inspire Learning programme in the Scottish Borders. But we're asking about, how do you change the culture of a space? So, digital learning, independent learning, self-regulation through digital tools. So that becomes, part of the culture. And he kind of gave us some guiding some guiding examples of what they use within the Inspire Learning project, although that's on a much bigger scale than in your classroom or in your school. The principles were the same, and he referenced a person called Cotter about his 8 principles of leading change, and that's the one that you can see on the right hand side there, about creating a sense of urgency and building a guiding coalition and form a strategic vision. I'll drop the link into that particular paper, because I looked at it, I thought, this is all about business, but actually it's about changing culture and bringing people along with you. So we had conversations around this. So how do we create a sense of, is there a sense of urgency for independent learning? And how do we create that? And who do we need to get on board in our setting in order to move that forward? And what does our vision look like? I know there'll be a vision for the school, but how does our vision kind of sit within that school vision, or need the local authority vision? So all those types of conversations that you would have when doing any kind of change project, it was important to kind of think about that in the context of, well, if self-regulation with digital tools is important, why is it important? How do we get people on board? And you also started talking about and referencing the key elements of success that they felt they had within their rollout of digital within the Scottish Borders, and about conversations like, well, where is the classroom now? And indeed, the power of moments. And it was something that resonated quite a bit with some of the attendees. What he was saying is that we often miss opportunities to make moments that make things memorable, that makes people want to be part of an experience. And so he was talking about, when they were giving out all their iPads, for example. They wanted to make a big event of it and getting the pupils to take the cellophane off, and there was music and there was T-shirts and there was high fives, and they wanted to make a moment. But that was obviously on a larger scale. But he was kind of asking us, well, do we take opportunities in our everyday learning and teaching to create moments that make things memorable for pupils? And he's not talking about, going off to London to visit a museum every week, but actually opportunities to celebrate and success, to make people to motivate pupils to want to be part of that learning experience. And I was thinking about that, and it was funny. I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues in the digital team around the BEBRAS computational thinking competition that happens. And I know that when I used to be in school, we used to deliver that kind of BEBRAS competition, and it was great. And we delivered it, but we just delivered it because it was on. And I didn't really take the opportunity to, make a moment out of that, about kind of the potential for success and kind of winning and trips away. It was just an activity that we did, and that stimulated quite a lot of discussions around about how that can promote motivation. And you can't have self-regulation and self-efficacy without motivation. So that Andrew talked about that, and the video of his recording. And the video of his recording is on the team, which for some reason the audio didn't capture, but the subtitles there. So I'm going to ask him to kind of do it again when we do our next cohort, so you can kind of do it properly. But it's a good thing to kind of help situate kind of our thinking around about culture. Now, bearing in mind, at this point, we're not really talking about digital. We're talking about how we create the conditions to make learners be better self-regulating. So we started up. Sorry, I'm going to just jump ahead of the slide just now. We're going to so this whole idea about kind of self-regulation and say, well, what does that actually mean? What does it look like? So we've got the culture. We want to create the environment where it can happen. We know how to use the tools. We don't need to learn how to use the tools. But when we think about self-regulation, and when we think about that self-regulation process, we want to know, well, how do we fit digital, or should or could we fit digital into that cycle? So you wanted to kind of break down and think about, so what are some of those strategies that actually work for self-regulation? So again, we asked another speaker to come in to talk about strategies that support self-efficacy, self-regulation, and began to have conversations around, well, where does that fit in with digital? And some of those strategies are listed here. So proven strategies that help learners be better at self-regulating, at managing their own learning. So the ability to self-evaluate, to seek information, to keep records, to get assistance, to rehearse and memorize. I forget the name of the person that you quoted, but it'll come back to me in just a second. So we started having conversations around this, and we've got the conditions, or think about the conditions for learning. We think about the opportunities to use digital within that self-regulation set of strategies, and this is the types of activities that we could and should be doing. And then we would go off and think about, well, what does that then look like within a digital environment? So there were some really interesting conversations that were happening there, and I think an important one, or certainly an interesting one, that was about seeking information. We had a conversation about seeking information, and I was genuinely surprised at the amount of kind of comments and discussions around about, well, do pupils know how to use advanced search tools? And it sounds like something that should be done, we've been doing for 20 years, which I know that I taught advanced searching, but I don't think I taught it in a context. I don't think I taught it particularly well, or if I did teach in a context, it was, we're going to need to find specific information about a processor, so let's use keywords about the processor and use the advanced search tools. But again, what was coming out of this is like, well, actually there was a lot of people didn't know that these advanced search tools exist, or they forget about them. So could we, or should we be producing support to help teachers with that type of skill? How do we organize our learning environment to make things easier to find, things like OneNote and tags and all those things? How do we allow pupils to better self-evaluate? And we got into conversations about rubrics and how to write an effective rubric, and how you might use that, or how pupils might use that to say how well they've done in a task, and where does that fit in? So all these conversations were beginning to happen. And will continue to happen with the expectation that come about the end of October time, when we've had enough of the conversations, we'll begin to try and say, well, what is it we can produce? What is it that we can do in regards to self-regulation and digital, and what can we produce and start to share via probably the DigiLearn Scott site. So this is what we're kind of hoping to produce there. Is like, so what does that independent learning progression look like? Where can these digital tools be used to develop those behaviours and skills? What can you do within your digital environment that makes that digital space more accessible for learners? Then there are also these kind of individual schools and actions that I've been having conversations with other individuals within the group. So what I mean by that is that there was, like most people, there was people are interested in very specific things. And one of those things was video. And over the pandemic, obviously, video was used a lot over remote learning, and there's this real desire. So we've got we've got West to West that's part of the National E-Learning offer. It's full of video content there. We've got teachers that are using videos, and there was commentary coming through. A maths teacher was saying that she still wants to use videos and still uses videos with her higher maths class, but she needs to teach the pupils. We need to teach the pupils how to use the videos, to take notes, to understand, to stop, start. So we began thinking, well, actually, could that be a thread that could run through, for example, within a cluster project? So speaking to a few teachers around about this, and there's kind of thoughts and movement towards this idea of taking, well, actually, could we use video and some of these skills about kind of independent learning and work with our clusters to support some form of longer transition over the period of like 4 or 5 months. And what that might look like, well, perhaps you have 4 or 5 departments, subject departments in a high school, and they produce a short video about a particular topic, area of study, a piece of knowledge that all the primary schools use. But within that, in the video, you are going to try and get the pupils to do those kind of self-regulation skills. So ask them to do a bit of self-evaluation, ask them to do a bit of rehearsing, ask them to do those types of things with the teacher in the primary school kind of nudging and supporting that as they go along. So there's a bit of connectivity between the primary school experience and that kind of high school experience, which kind of led on to another conversation with the physics teacher, who I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone, who has a Nat 4-5 class, a bi-level class, and this teacher was saying, I've got this notebook, I've used Teams and OneNote, and I've got my Nat 4 syllabus and my Nat 5, and we've been trying to do that for a little while and try and make sure that pupils are independently working and trying that flipped learning approach, but they find it hard to engage like that. And it's about, well, what are the skills they need to be successful in order to kind of independently kind of work with that notebook, with that split course. If you're speaking to the Nat 4s, how can the Nat 5s kind of go ahead and do things? And we've got a conversation about the development of those skills from an earlier age, from S1 through to S3. What does that look like within science, and S1 to S3? How are we promoting that? And kind of so planning forward to say, well, let's try and think about what that looks like as a progression within science. So if in years to come there are other bi-level classes, the pupils in a better position to engage with that, with those types of materials. But then there was also the conversations that just happened between individuals, and there's a couple of conversations that stand out. There was an early years teacher, and we were talking about how do we get our pupils to voice, to kind of talk about what they know and what they've learned. And she was saying that one of the activities they do with the early years pupils is they've got the risk assessments on their iPad, but instead of the practitioners doing it, they ask the pupils to go around with the iPad on Book Creator to talk about risk assessment and why a certain activity might be risky and the types of things they can do to mitigate those risks, and get the pupils to talk about their understanding of risk. Anyway, in the same breakout room, there was a principal teacher of design and technology there, who was like almost a revelation, who was saying, I'm going to do it with my hires. We've got to do risk assessments in science and technology. This is a great idea. So just connecting people up across sectors, talking about those little things that actually make a bit of difference has been really exciting. So moving forward, we're going to finish off that self-regulation idea and hopefully produce some of these outputs and begin to share them, and then move on to the other themes that are starting to kind of come through, those things about flexibility in the curriculum offer, which has kind of been touched upon with things like, you know, consortium arrangements and virtual schools and those types of things. But then move on to, well, we've all got these virtual environments within Glow or otherwise, and how we're making best use of that, how we're making best use of the data and analytics that are available to us, and what does that mean for, you know, streamlining processes at a school level. I think perhaps that might be more suitable to the educators that deal with that type of thing. I know that when I was a deputy, there was always kind of lots of data analysis to do. So we're looking at shaping that third section around about how do we leverage the data and analytics and the environments that we have to make things better for us. So that's where we're going. I would have hoped, as I said, to have started a few weeks previous, would have more outputs to show you, but I did think it was worth sharing. This is what we're doing. I'm very welcome to have more people join. I think we're going to try and start another kind of cohort again to kind of build on these things, and maybe if there's other themes that people want to talk about. But the idea is about creating that space, that collaborative space for like-minded educators who have the digital skills, who need to connect and want to connect with others for the greater good. So I'm going to stop presenting there and take any questions if anyone has any. I'm going to stop presenting. I'm going to look at the chat now for a second. Mrs. Hardy, will the self-regulatory skills link with the meta skills toolkit? Is that the SDS one, Miss Hardy?
Yeah,
Yes.
There was a session on that this morning when I launched it. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. A lot of those things that are mentioned there, they're essentially, the skills of things like self-evaluation and reflection and voicing are comparable with the phrasing that's sometimes used within that toolkit. I just saw that this morning as well, actually. Lovely. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? No? Kirsty, Louise, they're my colleagues within the Education Scotland department. Louise delivered the session along with Tim Beattie on digital independent learning yesterday, and I don't know if that link is available.
Yeah, Brian, I've just popped it into the chat facility there as well.
Perfect.
And it just really to say to everybody, you know, this is quite a new page for us on the blog, so it's constantly evolving. We've got links to the EEF in there in the research on metacognition, so please feel free if you want to take your thinking deeper and to know a little bit more about the research, absolutely pop over there. But what's really important about this page is actually, you know, just the quick wins and how you could, you know, really support some really crucial independent learning strategies just through the use of some very simple digital tools as well, just to make your life easier as an educator. So there are some really nice little ideas within there too.
You know what I'm going to do as well? I'm going to share a quick form that if anyone's interested in signing up for a cohort, a part of this, people can kind of just do that just now. So I'll share that form just now. There we go. It's because we run it in Glow, it'll ask you for your Glow username and password to use the form, just so we can almost track in the local authority kind of input. I don't know when we'll start our next cohort, but that's just the sign up form I used for the last one. But if you're interested and want to kind of form another wee group and to talk about interesting things in digital, then just fill your name in that form, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. There we go. Form didn't work for you. That's strange. Why is that? You'd think being part of the digital team, I wouldn't have any issues. were sending a format, wouldn't you? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change the settings. Give me 2 seconds. Settings, anyone can respond. Share, copy, and paste.
Some really nice feedback there, Brian. Lots of people saying, one person, Walter, said it was the best session he's ever been to at SLF.
Oh, well, that's...
You paid him money.
That's not at all. No, but as I say, I think that for me the most important thing is it's about we're now in a space where communities of practice can actually work, and we have the skills, and not one single person knows the answer to anything. You know, so that group thought, that crowd thought is, I think, is really useful, and I hope that these types of activities, regardless of what happens with, you know, Education Scotland, SQA change and reform, these are the types of activities that I think, you know, do add value to individuals' professional learning, but also the greater good. And again, I'm kind of sorry that I didn't manage to start the course a few weeks earlier, because it would be nice to kind of share some of the actual outputs of the course so far, but sometimes things don't go the way you expect them to. Right, lovely.
Just lovely feedback from everyone, Brian. It's really, really good.
Thank you very much. Well, that's almost 4:30. I'm going to hang around until the end of 4:30, but there we are.
This is when you have to start singing a song. I always find the girl from Ipanema works well.
All right. I do have a guitar just behind me. So if you're not careful, you're going to get a busking thing and a wee GoFundMe page. Thanks, folks. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Appreciate that.